Hello, everybody. You might be surprised actually to see me here again. Uh, Unfortunately, Dr. Anusha's mother had a slip mm, and she was taken to the hospital for some injury in the knee, I think ankle. Okay, so that's the reason she applied for leave, and I'm continuing what she has said in the previous class. I think she has completed retinitis pigmentosa, retinal detachment also. And now we are going to go for actually tumors of the retina, out of which retinoblastoma is the most important thing for you people in the examination. So normally the type of question we ask actually in the examination is, mention the differential diagnosis of leukocoria and write in detail the management, these clinical features, management of retinoblastoma. So that's how actually we give it. Okay. So the tumors of the retina, we have very many. The classification is primary tumors, and again we have secondary tumors. And the primary tumors, it can be a neuroblastic tumors, retinoblastoma, out of which there are retinoblastoma, astrocytoma, benign epithelioma, melanotic malignant tumors, and mesodermal angiomata, cavernous hemangioma is another thing which we get quite frequently, and phacomatoses is the third one, where you see actually angiomatosis, tuberous sclerosis, neurofibromatosis, encephalo-trigeminal angiomatosis, and out of the secondary tumors, we can have actually the tumors which are spreading directly from its original origin, such as a malignant melanoma of the choroid or malignant melanoma somewhere in the eye. It can have a direct extension and it may go on to actually the retina, giving rise to a secondary tumor. And metastatic carcinomas, bronchogenic carcinoma, carcinoma of the breast, these things sometimes they can actually spread to the retina. Metastatic sarcoma, so many sarcomas anywhere in the eye or somewhere else, it can actually get spread to the retina by way of actually a contiguous spread or lymphatic spread or by way of blood spread. Metastatic malignant melanoma from the skin. So this is another tumor. Though these things actually they are very, very rare. And retinoblastoma is the most common tumor we come across in the eye, especially in the children. So retinoblastoma is a proliferation of neural cells which have failed to evolve or grow normally. So it is also known as glioma retinae or retinoblastoma. So the etiology, if we take actually, usually it occurs in infants and very young children. And most commonly it is seen actually below 18 months. Though the extreme surface, the cases of retinoblastoma, they are seen even up to 9 years. It is frequently a congenital condition when it involves either it can be unilateral or bilateral tumor. So the incidence, if we take actually, it is seen in 1 in 20,000 live births. And as I have already mentioned, it's seen between 1 to 2 years, and 18 months age group actually is most frequently encountered the retinoblastoma cases. And it's very rare actually in Negroes compared to the white population, and about 25 to 30% of the cases they are bilateral. And if we take actually the hereditary or the inheritance method of the retinoblastoma, so in about 90% of the cases, it's a sporadic transmission. Due to mutation, usually it is sporadic cases, they are usually unilateral. And familial, so about 10% of the cases they are familial. Autosomal dominant inheritance is the predominant one. And in these cases actually usually bilateral, and several children of the same family, they are affected in case of familial cases, retinoblastoma. So retinoblastoma was the first cancer directly associated with genetic abnormality. And deletion or mutation of Q14 band of chromosome 13 is seen in cases of retinoblastoma. This chromosome is responsible for controlling retinal cell division. So retinal cell division is continuous, unchecked, causing retinal tumors in these cases. So if we take actually the pathology of retinoblastoma, so there will be a malignant proliferation of immature retinal cells called retinoblasts. And growth consists of, whenever you take actually the section and see, the growth consists of round cells with large nuclei resembling the cells of nuclear layer of retina. And cells may present as undifferentiated. There are two types of cells which may be present in these cases. Either it can be undifferentiated tumor or differentiated tumor. And microscopic features, if you take actually, it's a well differentiated. In case of well differentiated tumors, you see Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes, highly specific of retinoblastoma. This figure actually we are going to show you shortly in the next few slides. And presence of areas of necrosis and calcification is also seen in case of retinoblastoma. So these are the two actually microscopic features. The first and foremost is presence of Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes, which is highly characteristic of retinoblastoma. And secondly, you'll see areas of necrosis and also areas of calcification, what we call a stipple calcification in case of actually the retinoblastoma microscopically. Okay, so this is actually the histopathological picture of retinoblastoma. So this is Flexner Wintersteiner rosette. Center is actually the clear, and you see the round cells, the cells around with large nuclei. This is undifferentiated tumor cells are also there. And Homer Wright rosette. There are two types of rosettes which we encounter in case of microscopic and histopathological picture of retinoblastoma. One is Homer Wright rosettes and Flexner Wintersteiner rosette. And this is Homer Wright rosette. This is actually in the center you have the cells. Okay. So these are all tumor cells. And then here, Flexner Wintersteiner rosette, here the center is clear, but here it is not clear. Okay. So this is histopathological section of a well-differentiated retinoblastoma showing Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes. This is one. So likewise, there are plenty. Okay. So well-differentiated retinoblastoma again with many Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes. These are all Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes. And poorly differentiating retinoblastoma. This is a picture of poorly differentiating retinoblastoma. And so the growth patterns, either it can be an endophytic growth or an exophytic growth. Endophytic growth actually it looks like white to cream colored mass breaks through the internal limiting membrane of the retina. So no surface vessels are small. Number of no surface vessels or small irregular tumor vessels can also be seen sometimes. Okay, here actually this is an endophytic tumor with vitreous seedling. These are all vitreous seeds. See, and this is the tumor. And this is a very large endophytic retinoblastoma with surface new vessels. This is the tumor. Okay. So the second one is an exophytic growth. So yellowish white lesions in subretinal space will be seen. Overlaying retinal vessels, they are increased in caliber and tortuosity, so they are tortuous. Associated with normally these exophytic tumors, they're associated with subretinal fluid or a retinal detachment that can obscure the tumor. Initially, we may think actually it is a retinal detachment, and we may see some retinal subretinal fluid also. But if you will be very careful and see that with an indirect ophthalmoscope, you may find actually an exophytic tumor which is pushing the retina. And so this is like maybe it's here actually it's very difficult to differentiate deep retinal detachment. Okay. This is all retinal detachment, and this is normal. This thing. So growth patterns. It can be diffuse infiltrating. So there will be flat infiltration of the retina without discrete tumor mass, and there will be a conjunctival ecchymosis, that is swelling of the conjunctiva. A pseudohypopyon will be seen. Hypopyon is nothing but actually a bus in the anterior chamber. So always it need not necessarily be actually a bus. It can be tumor mass. It can be actually a flare which is coming down, settling out. It can be sometimes a cortical matter after surgery. We don't really aspirate that may come and get settled in the anterior chamber. So this is pseudohypopyon. It's nothing but actually we have the tumor cells which settle down in the anterior chamber, and associated with it, we see actually the vitreous inflammation. Vitritis will also be seen when you see with the slit lamp microscopy, and also with your indirect ophthalmoscope. So we see vitreous cells and vitreous inflammation. All these things will be seen in case of diffuse infiltrating this. And large tumor can be both endophytic or exophytic, which I have already mentioned. This is actually an intraretinal tumor. Okay, so these are the vessels which are actually enlarged in caliber, and also they are a little tortuous. And whole eye section which shows actually mixed endophytic tumor and exophytic tumor. Okay, into the subretinal space. And here again in exophytic retinoblastoma, the neoplasm is entirely external to the detached retina. And so here again you have large endophytic retinoblastoma, and this is an exophytic retinoblastoma giving rise to actually an elevated retina. And here we have actually this is a drawing of the cross section of the eyeball showing endophytic retinoblastoma and exophytic retinoblastoma. Okay. This is exophytic retinoblastoma. This is endophytic retinoblastoma. So here again we have it's a very peripheral retinoblastoma seen on scleral indentation. So the retina is somewhere beyond, and here actually this is a peripheral area where you see the retinoblastoma, and very small intraretinal retinoblastomas which are seen on indirect ophthalmoscope again, and small endophytic retinoblastoma which you see here, and larger intraretinal retinoblastomas here what we see here with vitreous seedings. So if we take actually the clinical course of retinoblastoma, so the clinical course will be the child is brought to the ophthalmologist by the parents. So the parents, they come and complain that the child is having a white pupil or leukocoria or a yellow reflex in the pupil, okay, or emerald cat's eye, that's what we call it. And sometimes these children, they may be brought for say squint, strabismus. Either it can be a divergent squint or a convergent squint. And a complicated cataract can also occur in these cases, and the eye may become actually enlarged or proptosed, so that giving rise to an appearance of ophthalmos, and there can be actually a hypopyon or setting of actual tumor cells in the anterior chamber, and the eye will be proptosed. And when you compare actually with both the eyes, you see one eye is in normal position and another eye is actually proptosed in case of actually unilateral retinoblastoma. So these are the figures in the patient how actually they present with, and this is leukocoria, unilateral leukocoria, and this side actually it is normal, and bilateral leukocoria, both the eyes, and secondary glaucoma and ophthalmos in case of right eye. Here, left eye is normal, and iris nodules sometimes, and the pseudohypopyon. This is the pseudohypopyon, and iris nodules. These are present here, and orbital inflammation. So this is actually the whole orbit. Actually, it's involved in the inflamed. You see, so it is red and the swollen lids, both the sides, and palpebral aperture is completely closed, and the patient will not be able to open the eye. And neither we have the difficulty unless we use actually pediatric retractors to separate the lids and see the anterior segment. And here is an orbital invasion, so it went into the orbit almost. And in these cases, actually, we may require an orbit accentuation. So there are 4 stages of retinoblastoma. The first and foremost is a quiescent stage, lasting from 6 months to about 1 year, where actually the eye will be required. And second one is a glaucomatous stage. The retinoblastoma is not diagnosed and treated in the quiescent stage. It may proceed to actually a glaucomatous stage, where the child actually will have severe pain, redness, and lacrimation. And the eyeball will, when you examine the patient, the child, the eyeball is enlarged and proptos associated with a conjunctival condition. Cornea will be hazy, and if we take actual intraocular pressure with a Perkins Perkins handheld appellation tonometer or a non-contact tonometer, IOP will be raised. Picture simulating severe acute uveitis can also occur, and this is what we call a masquerading syndrome, retinoblastoma masquerading as an iridocyclitis. So these things also can be seen. Suppose if the child is brought to you with findings of an acute iridocyclitis, forget not actually to investigate and probe further, to look into actually the posterior segment to see any evidence of retinoblastoma, because retinoblastoma may actually present as a masquerading syndrome, and retinoblastoma here actually masquerades as iridocyclitis. Okay, so stage of extraocular extension is the other thing. So the retinal tumor is localized, so the prognosis is definitely better. So sometimes actually there will be an extraocular extension. So the globe bursts through the sclera at the limbus, because that's the weakest point. And rapid fungation and extraocular extension into the other structures will also occur. So that is stage of extraocular extension. And stage of distant metastasis is the final stage, where you have lymphatic spreads to the periocular lymph nodes and a direct extension into the optic nerve and also the brain, and blood spread through the blood vessels, the cranial and other bones, and also liver and other organs. They are also affected in case of retinoblastoma in stage of distant metastasis. So if we take actually differential diagnosis, initially also I said the question will be, I mentioned the differential diagnosis of leukocoria, and describe in detail the retinoblastoma, various types, and also the pathology and stages and management of retinoblastoma. That's how actually we give the question. And the differential diagnosis of leukocoria, and first and foremost is inflammatory deposits in the vitreous, with or without retinal detachment. A plastic cyclitis or a choroiditis may actually resemble a case of retinoblastoma, giving an appearance of leukocoria. And secondly, a toxocara endophthalmitis or toxocara infestation in the child can give you an appearance of leukocoria. And we have the certain congenital defects such as persistent hypoplastic primary vitreous and a coloboma of the choroid. These things also they come with actually a white pupil or a leukocoria. A relectolental fibroplasia, a retinopathy of prematurity, is another condition actually which looks like actually it comes with a leukocoria. And exudative retinopathy of Coats or Coats disease is another thing actually which appears. This condition actually is seen in the boys around 10 years of age, and this is this may appear actually as white pupil. So another thing is actually a congenital cataract. It will have to be differentiated from the hemorrhagic cat's eye or leukocoria. All these, except for the congenital cataract, the rest of the aforementioned 5 conditions. So these are also called pseudogliomas. So the diagnosis, all cases, both eyes should be well dilated and thoroughly examined ophthalmoscopically, both with the indirect ophthalmoscope with a scleral depressor to see actually the periphery of the retina, and it should be done under general anesthesia because the children, they will not be cooperative. Even if for the adults also sometimes indirect ophthalmoscopy is a little painful, they will not normally we do it. Even if they have some discomfort, they will have to bear with it. But the children, you cannot actually examine them unless you give them a general anesthesia. And for taking actual intraocular pressure also, it is necessary that the children must be administered general anesthesia, taking their care. Actually, there will not be any carbon dioxide retention. And also ketamine is not administered for using general anesthesia in these cases, because this may actually give rise to a raised intraocular pressure. And IOP must be recorded in almost all the cases suspicious of retinoblastoma, and it is definitely raised in case of retinoblastoma, but decreased in other aforementioned conditions of pseudogliomas. And calcification, stipple calcification occurs in about 75% of the cases of retinoblastoma, and it is pathognomonic of retinoblastoma. X-ray also demonstrates calcification within the tumor, stipple calcification, as I already mentioned. And if we do a CT, a scan of the orbits, it is more sensitive and it delineates actually the tumor and its extension. And a B-scan displays actually a cauliflower-like mass or a tumor arising from the retina with or without retinal detachment and with or without vitreous shadings. And lactate dehydrogenase level, LDH level, is raised in case of aqueous tumor, in case of retinoblastoma. So this is again an exophytic retinoblastoma, color photograph showing stipple calcification, calcific areas. And this is an ultrasound of a large retinoblastoma showing a V-Y pattern of internal reflectivity. That's not necessary for you people, but this is actually the retinoblastoma. So staging of retinoblastoma and classification of retinoblastoma is also important. There are two commonly mentioned staging of retinoblastomas. One is Reese-Elsevier classification system, and that actually it is outmoded now because of certain problems we encounter in rather predicting the prognosis of the case. And it is actually Reese-Elsevier. This is actually advocated in 1950. Was developed to predict the prognosis and after treatment with radiation. And in the 1990s, clinicians found that, as I told you, that no longer accurately reflect the prognosis with the newer treatment modalities we have now. We can give actually radiation, we can give actually the chemotherapy, and brachytherapy is also there. And all these things actually, they have enhanced actually the prognosis of the individual and reduced the mortality. And in most of the some cases actually will be able to save the vision of the individual after the advent of actually we have the newer modalities of radiotherapy. Okay. So next we have international classification of retinoblastoma was developed to better predict actually the need of enucleation or external beam irradiation treatment. So international classification of retinoblastoma is CRP. Group A, small intraretinal tumors less than 3 millimeters away from the fovea and disc. Group B, tumors which are of more than 3 millimeter size, macular and extrapapillary location or with subretinal fluid. And group C, tumors with the focal subretinal and vitreous seeding within 3 millimeters of the tumor. And group D is tumors with diffuse subretinal or vitreous seeding greater than 3 millimeters from the tumor. And group E is external extensive retinoblastoma occupying greater than 50% of the globe, with or without neovascular glaucoma, hemorrhage, extension of tumor to optic nerve or anterior chamber. So the conservative, there are modalities of management, the conservative tumor destructive therapy, and second one is enucleation, and third one is palliative therapy. So conservative therapy is indicated in stage 1 tumors. Tumor involves less than half of the retina, and optic nerve is involved, optic nerve is not involved. In such cases, actually, we treat them by cryotherapy, and laser photocoagulation is another, and thermotherapy is another, plate radiotherapy or brachytherapy is another, external beam radiotherapy is another. So these are the various modalities of chemotherapy. The details I don't think you will be needed in the examination. It's for post-practice. We don't ask you in the examination. So chemotherapy, there are certain modalities of chemotherapy, and standard dose CVE regimen for group A, B, C in patients in international classification. 3 weekly 6 cycles of carboplatin, vincristine, and etoposide. So carboplatin 18.6 milligrams and vincristine 0.05 milligrams on day 1 we give it, and etoposide 5 milligrams on day 1 and 2 we give it. And high dose CVE regimen for group D people, we give 3 weekly regimen of 6 to 12 cycles. Again, carboplatin, vincristine, etoposide. So carboplatin actually here it is 28 milligrams on day 1, 0.25 milligrams of vincristine on day 1, and etoposide 12 milligrams on day 1 and 2. Okay, so this is how actually we give it. So next we have actually, suppose if the tumor is not regressing with the palliative therapy such as chemotherapy and brachytherapy and all these things, and external radiation by linear accelerator directly burns the tumor only, leaving the normal tissue. So in such cases, actually, we may be left with no choice except to enucleate the tumor. If the tumor involves more than half of the retina, indications are, and optic nerve is involved, and glioma is present and anterior chamber is also involved. Glaucoma is present and anterior chamber is also involved. In these 3 conditions, actually, we do enucleation. Eyeball is enucleated with maximum length of, here actually, we try to cut the optic nerve as high as possible and request the pathologist to inform us whether there is infiltration of the tumor at the distal end of the cut optic nerve. At least 1 centimeter of the optic nerve should be cut. And the eyeball is enucleated with maximum length of optic nerve, taking care not to cut reticular. If optic nerve is involved post-operatively by the findings of the pathologist, post-operative treatment should include external beam irradiation 5000 nats by linear accelerator, Hubbard 60 or whatever it is we give it, applied to the orbital apex, and chemotherapy CVE regimen combined with cyclosporin should also be given. Okay. Palliative therapy is indicated in patients where prognosis is for life is dismal in spite of aggressive treatment. So when there is an extensive spread of the retinoblastoma with orbital extension, retinoblastoma with intracranial extension, and retinoblastoma with distant metastasis. So then only we do palliative therapy. It includes a combination of chemoreduction, surgical debulking of the orbit, and external beam irradiation. It's only alleviate the symptoms of the patient, and to see actually the lifestyle is a little better, especially the children, they will not have. So they can stay without pain and everything. So that's that itself is sufficient for us. So the prognosis, if untreated, prognosis is definitely bad. Rarely spontaneous regression of the tumor may occur with the shrinkage of the eyeball into necrosis followed by calcification. It is very, very rare. And prognosis is fine, survival rate about 70 to 85% if the eyeball is enucleated before the occurrence of extraocular extension. And poor prognostic factors are optic nerve involvement undifferentiated tumor cells, massive choroidal invasion. So these are actually the poor prognostic like this. Okay. So before actually we go on to the next topic, I think I'll show you some videos how we do actually enucleation. So 360 degrees peritomy is done. The conjunctiva aspect of the limbus, almost 360 degrees. Sound rattler. So the horizontal muscles are separated.
This is Richard Allen at the University of Iowa. This video demonstrates an enucleation with placement of a porous polyethylene implant. The patient in this video had a choroidal melanoma. A 360-degree conjunctival peritomy is performed with Westcott scissors.
So as I said, 360 degrees
Dissection is then performed in each of the quadrants between the rectus muscles with Stephen scissors.
Separated from underlying Tenon's fascia and also the sclera with the scissors.
A von Graefe muscle hook is then used to hook the medial rectus muscle. This is then often transferred to a green hook. The rectus muscle is tagged with 5-0 vicryl suture on a spatula needle placed in a locking fashion.
We anchor the incision of actually.
The muscle is then disinserted from the globe with Westcott scissors. A portion of the muscle insertion is left remaining for future traction suture placement.
Actually the incision.
The inferior rectus muscle is then tagged and disinserted, flush with the globe. The lateral rectus muscle is then tagged and disinserted from the globe, leaving a small stump for future traction suture placement. The superior rectus muscle is then disinserted flush with the globe. A 4-0 silk suture is then placed through the stumps of the medial and lateral rectus muscles for traction. The superior oblique tendon is then hooked and transected with Westcott scissors.
Likewise, superior oblique and also inferior
The inferior oblique muscle is then hooked and transected with cautery. Enucleation scissors are then used to identify the optic nerve from the lateral approach. With the scissors closed, the optic nerve is felt from both above and below. Then the blades of the scissors are opened and the nerve is transected.
The optic nerve.
The posterior tenons is removed from the globe and pressure with a 4x4 gauze is placed for approximately 5 minutes to ensure hemostasis. Any remaining bleeders are identified and cauterized. The orbital implant is then placed. This is a 20 millimeter porous polyethylene implant with pre-drilled holes. The rectus muscles are then attached to the implant using the pre-drilled holes. This is performed with each of the 4 rectus muscles, ensuring that none of the conjunctiva is advanced with the rectus muscles. The conjunctiva and tenons are inspected, and then the tenons is closed with interrupted 5-0 vicryl suture placed in a buried fashion with the knot deep. The tenons is closed to ensure adequate apposition and also to ensure that none of the conjunctiva is buried in the closure. The conjunctiva is then closed with a running 7-0 vicryl suture. At the conclusion of the case, a conformer is placed with antibiotic ointment, and then the eye is patched for at least 3 days. The patient returns in 1 week for a postoperative visit and patch removal if necessary.
Conformer is being kept under surveillance.
Enucleation is performed for various indications: an intraocular tumor, a blind painful eye, a severely traumatized eye, or a deformed physical eye without visual potential. For an ophthalmic surgeon, the goal following enucleation is to provide an optimal match with the contralateral eye and restore the natural appearance. The characteristics of an ideal anophthalmic socket include a centrally placed, well-covered implant of adequate volume, a socket lined with healthy conjunctiva, deep fornices to help retain the prosthesis, normal eyelid position with symmetric lid crease, good implant motility which is transmitted to the overlying prosthesis, and a prosthesis that matches the other eye. A well-planned surgical technique with adequate volume replacement provides gratifying static cosmesis. However, optimizing prosthesis motility can be challenging. Currently available implants can be categorized as non-integrated, are the implants that do not integrate with either the prosthesis or the orbital tissues. Semi-integrated are the implants that integrate with either the prosthesis or the orbital tissues. Integrated are the implants that integrate with both the prosthesis and the orbital tissues. Biointegrated are the implants that induce fibrovascularization within the substance and thus get integrated. Biogenic are the implants that are of biological origin. Porous implants, although in wide use, have many complications. The raised cost of these implants was also a major concern. A traditional non-integrable sphere, when wrapped and centered in the muscle cone and connected to the recti muscles, offers some prosthesis motility. However, such a procedure requires the use of specifically processed human donor sclera, pericardium, or fascia lata. Again, these raise the cost of surgery significantly. Enucleation by the myoconjunctival technique using a silicone implant provides a safe and a cost-effective alternative procedure with prosthesis motility comparable to biointegrable implants while minimizing the complications. The surgery is usually performed under general anesthesia. It is important for the surgeon to review the patient's medical record and perform a thorough examination, including indirect ophthalmoscopy where possible, to ensure that the correct eye is being enucleated. After the patient is prepared and draped, a wire speculum is placed to exclude the eyelashes from the field. A lateral canthotomy is performed. A A 360-degree peritomy is performed at the limbus using a blunt tip Westcott scissors, preserving as much of conjunctiva as possible. Anterior Tenon's fascia is separated from the sclera. Blunt dissection with a 15-degree curved blunt tip tenotomy scissors in 4 quadrants between recti muscles separates deep Tenon's fascia. The muscles are isolated in the following sequence: medial rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, superior rectus, superior oblique, and inferior oblique. Each of the recti muscles is identified, hooked, and double tagged, first with 4-0 silk suture just short of the muscle insertion, and then with 6-0 Weichel suture about 6 mm distally. Special care is taken not to accidentally perforate the eye while passing the sutures. Each of the recti muscles is then transected at a point between the 2 sutures. Bipolar radiofrequency cautery is used to minimize bleeding. 4-0 silk sutures serve as tractional sutures, while 6-0 Weichel sutures would later be used to suture the muscles through the conjunctiva. Superior oblique and inferior oblique muscles are hooked and transected and allowed to retract posteriorly. A conjunctival relaxing incision is made temporarily for easy manipulation. The eyeball is prolapsed between the blades of the via speculum to put the optic nerve at a gentle stretch. With a gentle forward traction on the eyeball using the 4 silk sutures, a 15-degree curved blunt tip tenotomy scissors is introduced from the lateral aspect between the lateral rectus and the eyeball. Or a straight scissors introduced from the medial aspect is an appropriate alternative. The optic nerve is palpated with the closed tip of the scissors while maintaining gentle traction on the eyeball. The scissors is moved posterior to touch the orbital apex while strumming the optic nerve. The blades of the scissors are open to straddle the optic nerve, and the nerve is transected with one bold cut. Our case being retinoblastoma, the transection was performed 2 mm anterior to the superior orbital fissure to gain a good optic nerve length while avoiding injury to the superior orbital fissure contents. This maneuver generally provides at least 15 mm long optic nerve stump. Enucleation spoon and a heavy enucleation scissors, if used, limit space for maneuverability and result in a shorter optic nerve stump. Hemostasis is achieved by pressure. Deep orbital packing does distort the posterior Tenon's layer and is often not necessary. The enucleated eyeball is carefully inspected for intra or perineuritic optic nerve invasion by the tumor and full thickness scleral or extraocular extension. The length of the optic nerve stump is documented. The eyeball is placed in 10% formalin and submitted for histopathology. An appropriately sized silicone orbital implant is placed posterior to posterior tenons. Size of the implant is governed by the age of the patient, axial length of the eye, whether wrapping is used, and the plane of placement. Posterior tenons is closed with interrupted 6-0 Weichel sutures. Each of the recti muscles is sutured through the anterior tenons and conjunctiva just short of its respective fornix using pre-placed double-armed Weichel sutures. The suture knots remain exteriorized. These are called myoconjunctival sutures. Anterior tenons is closed with interrupted 6-0 Weichel sutures. Conjunctival closure is done in a continuous key pattern suturing with 6-0 Weichel suture. A A snugly fitting conformer is placed and a median tarsorrhaphy is performed with 6-0 Vicryl suture. The suture tarsorrhaphy is removed after 1 week. The conformer is left in situ until prosthesis is fitted. The socket is generally ready for the placement of a prosthesis in about 4 to 6 weeks. Myoconjunctival technique using a silicone implant is an inexpensive method of enucleation with minimal complications. Implant exposure and migration are very uncommon. This technique may also be used in those requiring periorbital radiotherapy following surgery. It offers an excellent lifelike quality to the prosthesis by providing a static and dynamic match with the contralateral eye.
So that completes actually retinoblastoma. So we'll be going on to the next topics tomorrow. Thank you.